The space station called Eternal Dawn floated in the darkness between stars. It was the largest thing humans had ever seen. 100 kilometers of silver metal and glowing lights, spinning slowly like a jewel in the black sky. Ships from 100 different worlds flew toward it, carrying kings and queens and leaders from every corner of the galaxy. Park stood at the window of the human ship and watched the station grow larger. He was 34 years old, with short black hair and a scar that ran across his left cheek. His eyes were tired, the eyes of a man who had seen too much death. He wore the uniform of a security officer, simple and dark, with no medals or decorations. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. He turned to see Ambassador Sora walking toward him. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. The diplomats back on Earth said she was the best they had, believed them. In the 3 months he had served as her personal guard, he had watched her talk her way through problems that would have started wars. "It's big," said simply. Sora laughed. "That's one way to describe it. They built this station 2,000 years ago. Back then, humans were still fighting with swords and arrows." Said nothing. He knew the history. The Dominion had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They were the oldest civilization, the most powerful, the most advanced. 100 different species lived under their rule. And now, for the first time, humans had been invited to join the galactic community. It should have been a moment of hope, but felt only worry. He had learned long ago that when powerful people gathered, blood usually followed. The human ship docked at the station, walked behind Ambassador Sora as they entered the main hall. His hand stayed close to the weapon at his hip, even though he knew it would be useless here. They had technology that could stop any human weapon before it fired. The hall was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Saw creatures with 4 arms and creatures with no arms at all. He saw beings made of light and beings made of stone. He saw things that his mind could barely understand. And standing above them all on a raised platform of white crystal were They were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. Their eyes were like liquid starlight, bright and ancient and cold. They moved with a grace that made every other species look clumsy. The Empress sat on a throne of living light. She was old beyond counting, her silver skin marked with glowing patterns that told the story of her reign. Beside her stood a woman who looked almost human in her features. "That's Princess Han Myra," Sora whispered to, "the heir to the Dominion." She chose a human-style name as a gesture of friendship. Studied the princess. She was watching the human delegation with obvious curiosity, her starlight eyes following their every move. When her gaze met his, she did not look away. There was something in her expression that surprised him, not the cold superiority he expected. Something softer, something almost like hope. The ceremony began. One by one, the delegations approached the throne and spoke their greetings. When it was humanity's turn, Sora stepped forward and delivered a speech that did not really listen to. His attention was elsewhere. Something was wrong. He had spent 15 years as a soldier before becoming a security officer. He had fought in the resource wars that nearly destroyed Earth. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming. The guards around the hall were positioned wrong. There were too many near the exits and not enough near the throne. Some of them kept glancing at each other, small looks that meant nothing to anyone who wasn't watching for them. And in the shadows at the edge of the hall, saw figures moving with too much purpose. He tried to tell the security chief. The alien looked at him with cold eyes and dismissed him without a word. He tried to tell the other human officers. They told him he was being paranoid. Maybe he was. Maybe years of war had broken something in his mind. Maybe he was seeing enemies where there were none. The first night of the summit ended with a grand feast. Stood behind Ambassador Sora's chair, watching the room while she talked and laughed with the other delegates. Princess Myra sat at the high table, and more than once caught her looking at the human section with that strange curiosity. It happened just before midnight. Sora stood to leave and moved to follow her. As they walked toward the exit, he saw it, a flash of movement in the corner of his eye, a figure stepping out of the shadows, a hand rising with something that gleamed like water. Did not think. His body moved on its own, years of training taking over. He threw himself in front of the ambassador just as the blade came down. The knife was made of something that should not exist. It passed through his armor like it was not there. It slid between his ribs and found his lung. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt, cold and burning at the same time. He fell to the ground. Above him he heard screaming. He heard the sound of weapons firing. He heard Sora calling his name. And then he heard a voice like singing bells, speaking in a language he did not understand. He looked up and saw Princess Myra standing over him, her starlight eyes wide with shock. She was saying something to the guards around her, her voice sharp with command. "Why?" she asked him, switching to the human language. "Why did you do that?" Tried to answer, but blood filled his mouth. He thought of his daughter, dead 5 years now in a war that accomplished nothing. He thought of all the people he had failed to save. He thought that maybe, just this once, he had done something right. Because, he managed to say, someone had to. The princess stared at him with an expression he could not read. Then she turned to her guards and spoke in that singing language again. This time her voice was not sharp. It was iron. "Save him," she commanded. "Use everything we have. I will not let this human die." The guards hesitated. Knew why. He was just a human, a member of a primitive species that had only just reached the stars. They did not waste their advanced medicine on lesser beings. But Princess Myra was the heir to the Dominion, and when she spoke again, her voice was the voice of someone who would one day rule 100 worlds. "I said save him, now." The darkness took then, but somewhere in that darkness he felt hands lifting him. He felt warmth spreading through his broken body, and he heard, just before consciousness left him completely, the princess speaking to someone he could not see. "In 3,000 years," she said, "no being has ever sacrificed themselves to protect another species. Not once. And tonight, a human did it without hesitation." There was a long silence. "Perhaps," Princess Myra said softly, "we have been wrong about them." Then there was only darkness, and the distant sound of stars singing. Woke in pieces. First came the sound, a soft humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then came the light, silver and gentle, pressing against his closed eyes. Then came the pain, or rather the memory of pain, fatting like a bad dream. He opened his eyes and saw a ceiling made of living crystal. It pulsed with soft light, like a heartbeat. He was lying on something that felt like water and air mixed together, supporting his body without touching it. "You are awake." He turned his head, which took more effort than it should have. Princess Myra sat in a chair beside his bed, watching him with those starlight eyes. She wore simple clothes, not the royal robes he had seen at the ceremony. She looked younger this way, less like a princess and more like a person. "How long?" asked. His voice was rough, like he had swallowed sand. 3 days. The knife damaged your lung and several other organs. Our physicians had to rebuild them." Looked down at his chest. There was no bandage, no scar, just smooth skin as if the wound had never happened. "Why?" he asked. Myra tilted her head, a strangely human gesture. "Why what?" "Why save me? I'm just a human. Your doctors could have let me die and no one would have blamed them." The princess was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. "I have lived for 200 years, she said. "In that time I have seen many things. I have seen wars and treaties and the rise and fall of empires. But I have never seen what you did. I have never seen someone give their life for a stranger. She's not a stranger, she's my ambassador. But she is not your family, she is not your lover. She is simply someone you were assigned to protect, and you threw yourself in front of a blade that would have killed you without hesitation, without thought. Myra leaned forward. Why? Stared at the crystal ceiling. He thought about the question, really thought about it. Why had he done it? He had asked himself the same thing 1,000 times during his years as a soldier. Because that's what humans do, he said finally. We protect each other, even when it hurts, even when it costs us everything. It's the only thing that makes us worth anything. Myra was quiet again. Then she said, "Tell me about Earth." So he did. Over the next several days, as his body healed, told the princess about his home. He told her about the blue oceans and green forests, the cities of glass and steel, the wars that had nearly destroyed everything. He told her about the resource wars, the terrible conflict that had killed millions and left the planet. He told her about his daughter. Her name was, he said, his voice steady even though his heart was breaking. She was 7 years old. She had her mother's smile and my stubbornness. She wanted to be a pilot when she grew up, to fly among the stars. What happened to her? A bomb, wrong place, wrong time. She was walking to school when it fell, closed his eyes. My wife blamed me. She was right to blame me. I was a soldier. I was supposed to protect people, but I couldn't protect my own daughter. Myra reached out and touched his hand. Her skin was cool and smooth like polished metal. "I am sorry," she said, and could tell she meant it. In return, Myra told him about the Dominion. She told him about the factions that fought for power, the old families that believed they should rule alone, the whispers in dark corners about her mother's weakness. She told him about her fears, her doubts, her hope that the galaxy could be better than it was. "There are those who hate what my mother is doing," she said. "They believe that opening our doors to species like yours will destroy us. They call humans primitive, dangerous, unpredictable." Are they wrong? I do not know. That is what frightens me. While healed, Ambassador Sora was not idle. She worked with the delegation's intelligence analyst to trace the assassination attempt. Was a quiet woman with quick eyes and a mind like a computer. She found things that others missed. The knife was made of molecular steel, reported to Sora. Only the Syndicate has the technology to create such a weapon, but they would never attack the Dominion without backing from someone powerful. Who? Sora asked. I don't know yet, but I will find out. The answer came in blood. On the 4th day after the attack, a lord named was found dead in his chambers. His body had been torn apart by human weapons, or at least weapons made to look human. The message was clear. Riots broke out in the lower decks of the station. Citizens attacked human traders and diplomats. 3 humans were killed before security could restore order. The other delegations began to whisper that maybe the humans were too dangerous, too violent, too primitive to be trusted. This is not random, said, her voice tight with anger. Someone is trying to start a war. Finally strong enough to leave his bed, met with Sora and in secret. He told them what he had seen at the ceremony, the guards positioned wrong, the figures in the shadows. He told them about his conversations with Princess Myra, about the factions that wanted the Empress gone. The attack on Ambassador Sora was not the real target, said. It was a test. They wanted to see how they would react when a human was hurt. They wanted to see if the princess would care. And she did care, Sora said slowly. She saved your life. Which makes her a threat. If she becomes Empress, she will continue her mother's work. She will bring humans into the Dominion. The old families will lose their power. His eyes widened. They're going to kill her. Not kill, said. Worse. They're going to make it look like humans killed her. They'll use her death to justify a war against Earth. They'll destroy us and remove the Empress at the same time. Sora's face went pale. We need to warn her. Was already moving toward the door. I know, that's why I'm going to her now. He found Princess Myra in her chambers, reading a book about human history. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment her starlight eyes were warm with welcome. Then she saw his expression, and the warmth faded. "What is wrong?" she asked. Told her everything. When he finished, Myra was silent for a long time. Her hands were shaking just slightly, the only sign of her fear. "I suspected," she said at last. "I knew there were those who hated my mother's policies, but I did not think they would go this far. We need to tell the Empress." "We cannot, we have no proof. And my mother has many enemies. If we accuse the wrong person, we will only make things worse." Knelt before her, looking up into those ancient starlight eyes. "Then we wait, we watch, and when they make their move, we stop them." Myra stared at him. "You would risk your life again for me, for my people." Thought about his daughter. He thought about all the people he had failed to save. He thought about this princess, this strange and lonely woman who had looked at humans and seen something worth saving. "Yes," he said simply, "I would." Myra reached out and touched his face, her cool fingers tracing the scar on his cheek. "You are a strange species," she said softly. "Violent and gentle, primitive and wise. I do not understand you at all." Smiled, the first real smile he had worn in years. "That's okay. Most of the time, we don't understand ourselves either." Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in the shadows of the station, the conspirators made their final plans. The third night of the summit arrived with ceremony and music. The great hall of the eternal dawn was filled with light and color. 1,000 different species gathered to celebrate peace and partnership. Long tables held food from 100 worlds. Musicians played instruments that humans had no names for. Laughter and conversation filled the air like perfume. Stood in his usual place behind Ambassador Sora's chair, watching the room with careful eyes. He had not slept in 2 days. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every whisper sounded like a conspiracy. Princess Myra sat at the high table beside her mother. She caught his eye and gave him a small nod. They had spent hours preparing for this night, trying to guess when and how the attack would come. But the conspirators had hidden their plans well. All Myra could do was wait and watch. The feast continued. Speeches were made. Toasts were raised. The Empress spoke about a new age of cooperation, about the bright future that awaited all species who joined the Dominion. Her voice was strong and clear, the voice of a ruler who had led her people for centuries. Almost believed that nothing would happen. Almost believed that he had been wrong about everything. Then the lights went out. The darkness was complete, so black that could not see his own hand in front of his face. For a moment there was silence, the shocked quiet of 1,000 beings who had never known true darkness. Then the screaming began. Moved on instinct, he grabbed Ambassador Sora and pulled her under the table, away from the chaos. Around them, he could hear bodies falling, weapons firing, voices crying out in languages he did not understand. "Stay here," he told Sora. "Do not move." "Where are you going?" "To find the princess." He did not wait for her answer. He crawled through the darkness, using his hands to guide him, following the sound of fighting toward the high table. His eyes slowly adjusted to the black, and he began to see shapes moving in the shadows. Some of them wore the armor of guards. Others moved with the quick, deadly purpose of assassins. He found Princess Myra surrounded by her own guards, but something was wrong. Half of them stood with their weapons pointed at her, while the other half stood between them with weapons drawn. A civil war in miniature, playing out in the darkness. "Stand aside," said one of the traitor guards. "The princess is no longer under your protection." "We serve the crown," replied a loyal guard. "We will die before we let you touch her." "That can be arranged." Did not hesitate. He came out of the darkness like a ghost, hitting the nearest traitor from behind. The guard fell without a sound, took his weapon and kept moving, striking fast and silent, using the confusion to his advantage. By the time the traders realized what was happening, 3 of them were down. The rest turned to face this new threat, and in that moment the loyal guards attacked. The fighting was brief and brutal. When it ended, only 2 loyal guards remained standing. "Are you hurt?" asked Myra. "No, but we must find my mother." They moved through the chaos toward the throne. The emergency lights had finally come on, casting everything in a dim red glow. Saw bodies on the ground, both and others. He saw frightened delegates hiding under tables. He saw guards fighting guards in small, vicious battles across the hall. And he saw the throne. The Empress stood at the center of a circle of traitors. Her guards were dead around her, silver blood pooling on the crystal floor. A tall in military armor stood before her, a blade pressed against her throat. He wore the insignia of a general, and his face was cold with certainty. "General," Myra whispered, her voice breaking. Knew the name. General was the Empress's most trusted military commander. He had served the Dominion for 500 years. He had won wars that decided the fate of worlds, and now he held a knife to his ruler's throat. "Stay where you are, Princess," said, his voice carrying across the hall. "This will be over soon." "What are you doing?" Myra demanded. "She trusted you. We all trusted you." "Trust is a weakness." Starlight eyes were empty of warmth. "Your mother has grown soft. She opens our doors to primitive species, weakens our bloodlines, forgets what made us strong. The humans have shown us what we've lost. They fight and struggle and die for scraps. We have forgotten how to fight. We have forgotten how to be." "So you would kill the Empress, start a war with Earth?" "I would do what must be done. When you are dead, killed by human weapons, the galaxy will demand revenge. We will destroy Earth and restore the Dominion to its former glory. It is the only way." Stepped forward before he knew what he was doing. He walked past the loyal guards, past the frightened delegates, into the open space before the throne. He was unarmed, still bandaged from his previous wounds, facing a general who had conquered worlds. Watched him approach with amusement. "A human, how fitting. Do you intend to stop me, little creature?" "Yes," said. The general laughed. It was a cold sound like ice breaking. "And how will you do that? You have no weapons, you have no power. You are nothing but a primitive ape playing at civilization." Kept walking. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our weapons, it's not our numbers, it's that we never stop fighting for the people we love. Not when we're outmatched, not when we're dying, not ever." He stopped in front of the general, close enough to see the patterns of light on his silver skin. "Let the Empress go, take me instead. A human life for a monarch. That's what you want, isn't it? A human to blame." Stared at him. For a moment something flickered in those empty eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "You would trade your life for hers. Why?" "Because someone has to." The general considered this for a long moment. Then he smiled, a thin and terrible expression. "Very well, I accept your offer." He released the Empress, who stumbled away from him, her starlight eyes wide with shock. Took her place, standing still as blade moved to his throat. Any last words, human? Felt the cold metal against his skin. He thought about his daughter, about Sara, about Myra. He thought about all the people who had told him that humans were primitive, worthless, insignificant. Then he moved. During his walk forward, he had picked up a shard of broken crystal from the floor. Now he drove it into his wrist with all his strength. The general screamed and dropped his blade, caught it before it hit the ground, spinning behind and pressing the weapon to his throat. "I said we never stop fighting," said quietly into the general's ear. "I didn't say we fight fair." The hall went silent. 1,000 beings stared at the impossible sight before them. A human, wounded and unarmed, had defeated the greatest military commander in the Dominion. Conspirators looked at each other. Their leader was captured. Their plan had failed. One by one, they dropped their weapons and surrendered. The Empress approached slowly. Her silver blood stained her robes, but her eyes were clear and strong. "You could have died," she said. "I've been dying for a long time," replied. "Tonight I finally had something worth living for." The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to her daughter, who stood frozen at the edge of the circle, tears of starlight streaming down her silver face. "Myra," the Empress said, "I believe you have found something precious." The princess nodded slowly. "I believe I have, Mother." Kept his blade at its throat and said nothing. But for the first time in 5 years, since the day his daughter died, he felt something that might have been hope. The days after the night of silver flames were chaos. General and his conspirators were taken to the deepest prisons of the station, where they would await trial for their crimes. The bodies of the fallen were gathered and mourned. The damage to the Great Hall was repaired with technology that seemed like magic to human eyes. But the political storm was just beginning. Delegates from 100 worlds demanded answers. How had such a conspiracy grown under the Empress's nose? How had a single human defeated the great general? What did this mean for the future of the Dominion? Some called for humanity to be expelled from the station immediately. They argued that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too violent to be trusted. They pointed to the bodies in the Great Hall and demanded justice. Others took a different view. They had watched walk unarmed into the face of death to save the Empress. They had seen him offer his life for a ruler who was not his own. They whispered that perhaps humans were exactly what the galaxy needed. Ambassador Sora worked day and night, talking to delegates, making deals, fighting for humanity's place in the stars. Became her right hand, gathering information and building alliances. Together they turned what could have been disaster into opportunity. Stayed out of the politics. He spent his days in the medical wing, recovering from wounds that he had not even noticed during the fight. The doctors clicked their tongues and shook their heads at the damage he had done to his body. Humans, they said, were remarkably bad at taking care of themselves. Princess Myra visited him every day. They talked about small things at first, books and music and the differences between their worlds. But slowly, as the days passed, their conversations grew deeper. "You saved my mother's life," Myra said one afternoon. "You saved the Dominion itself, and yet you hide here in the medical wing, away from the celebrations." "I didn't do it for celebrations," replied. "Then why? I have asked you this question before and you always give me the same answer. Because someone had to. But that is not an answer, that is an excuse." Was quiet for a long time. He looked at his hands from years of fighting and thought about all the things he had done in his life. The people he had killed, the people he had failed to save, the daughter who died because he was not there to protect her. "I was a soldier," he said at last. "I spent 15 years fighting in wars that accomplished nothing. I watched friends die for pieces of land that nobody wanted. I came home and found that my daughter was dead, killed by a bomb meant for someone else." Myra said nothing, but she reached out and took his hand. "After that, I stopped caring about living. I took the most dangerous assignments, the missions that nobody else wanted. I was waiting to die. I think I wanted to die. But I kept surviving and I couldn't understand why. And now I think I understand." He looked up at her, at those starlight eyes that had become so familiar. "I survived because I hadn't finished yet. There was something I still needed to do, someone I still needed to protect. Maybe, or maybe the whole damn galaxy. I'm still figuring it out." On the 10th day after the night of silver flames, the Empress summoned to her private chambers. Her rooms were unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that shifted and flowed like water. The ceiling opened to the stars, protected by a shield that was invisible to the eye. Everywhere there were artifacts from 1,000 worlds, gifts and treasures collected over centuries of rule. The Empress herself sat in a simple chair, looking older than she had before. The events of the summit had taken something from her, some vitality that might never return. But her eyes were still sharp, still filled with the intelligence that had kept her on the throne for so long. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. Sat. He felt small in this room, aware of how little time humans had been traveling among the stars compared to the beings who had built this place. "I have ruled the Dominion for 800 years," the Empress said. "In that time, I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves and others build civilizations that touched the very edge of the universe. I thought I had seen everything." She leaned forward, her starlight eyes fixed on his face. "Then you walked into my throne room, unarmed and wounded, and offered your life for mine. A human, a member of a species that has only been in space for 2 generations, and you did not hesitate." "I didn't have time to hesitate," said. "If I had thought about it, I probably wouldn't have done it." The Empress laughed, a sound like silver bells. "That is what makes your species so remarkable. You act from the heart, not the head. You love fiercely and fight recklessly and die for reasons that other species cannot understand. You are chaos in a universe that has grown too orderly." "Is that a good thing?" "I do not know, but I have made a decision." She stood, and despite her weariness, she seemed to fill the room with presence. "From this day forward, humanity will be declared a protected species of the Dominion. You will not be subjects but allies, partners, equals." Blinked. "Equals, but we've only been in space for—" "I know how long you have been in space. I also know what you did 10 days ago. That is enough." The Empress walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "There is something else. My daughter has grown, attached to you. She fights for your people in the council chambers. She speaks of you with warmth I have not heard in her voice for centuries." "I'm sorry." "Do not apologize. It is good for her. She has been lonely for too long, surrounded by courtiers who want only power and rivals who want only her throne. You see her as a person, not a princess. That is rare. That is precious." She turned back to face him. "I am naming you my daughter's personal guardian. The position is traditionally reserved for nobility, but I am making an exception. You will protect her. You will advise her. And when I am gone, you will help her rule." Stood up so fast that his chair fell over. "Wait. No, I can't. I'm just a security officer. I was a soldier. I don't know anything about ruling." "You know how to serve. You know how to sacrifice. You know how to love. These are the things a ruler needs most." The Empress smiled, and for a moment she looked almost young. "Besides, you have made powerful enemies tonight. General's allies are still out there. They will want revenge. As my daughter's guardian, you will have the protection of the crown. It is the safest place for you now." "Is that the only reason?" The Empress's smile faded. "No, the other reason is that my daughter asked for you. She has never asked me for anything in 200 years. She has always accepted whatever fate gave her. But when I told her I was considering this appointment, she asked. She said, 'Please.'" The Empress shook her head. "I did not know my daughter knew that word." Thought about Myra. He thought about her starlight eyes and her silver skin, and the way she looked at him like he was something wonderful and strange. He thought about his daughter, dead and gone, and the empty space she had left in his heart. He thought about the future, and for the first time in years it did not seem dark. "All right," he said, "I'll do it." The Empress nodded. "I know you will." She walked past him toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. When my daughter asked for you, she said something strange. She said that watching you had taught her what it meant to be human. She said she wanted to rule the human way." "What does that mean?" "I do not know, but I suspect we will all find out." She left him alone in the room of living crystal, with the stars watching overhead and the weight of 100 worlds settling on his shoulders. Closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Somewhere out there, his daughter was watching. He hoped she would be proud. 5 years passed like water through fingers. The galaxy changed in ways that nobody had predicted. Human ships now flew freely through Dominion space, their engines humming with a mix of Earth technology and science. Trade routes connected worlds that had never spoken before. Ideas flowed between species like rivers finding the sea. On Earth, the scars of the resource wars slowly healed. New cities rose from the ashes of the old, built with knowledge borrowed from 100 different civilizations. Children learned alien languages in school. Young people dreamed of traveling to distant stars, and some of them actually did it. Ambassador Sora retired from diplomatic service and wrote a book about her experiences. It became the most popular book in human history. She spent her remaining years teaching at a university, telling young diplomats about the night a security officer changed everything. Became the head of humanity's permanent diplomatic mission to the Dominion. She was tough and fair and brilliant, and even the oldest learned to respect her. When she spoke, the council listened. General died in prison, alone and forgotten. His conspiracy faded into history, remembered only as a warning about the cost of pride and hatred. And Park walked through the gardens of the imperial palace watching three suns set in colors that human eyes were never meant to see. He was 40 years old now. His hair had gone at the temples, and new scars had joined the old ones on his body. He walked with a slight limp from an injury that even medicine could not fully heal. But his eyes were no longer tired. They were the eyes of a man who had found his purpose. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Princess Myra approaching. She had changed too in the past 5 years. She walked with more confidence now, spoke with more authority. The frightened young princess he had met on the eternal dawn was gone. In her place was a woman ready to rule. Ambassador sent her report, Myra said, falling into step beside him. The syndicate has formally requested membership in the Dominion. They said they were inspired by humanity's example. Laughed, a sound that still surprised him after all these years. The galaxy's most notorious criminals want to go legitimate because a human got lucky with a piece of broken glass. It was not luck, Myra said. She had said it 1,000 times before, and she would probably say it 1,000 times again. And you know it. They walked in comfortable silence through the garden. Around them, flowers from dozens of worlds bloomed in impossible colors. A fountain sang with water that fell upward instead of down. Somewhere in the palace, servants prepared for another day of councils and ceremonies. I saw the memorial, Myra said after a while, on Earth, the one they built for your daughter. Nodded. He had visited it once 2 years ago. A small stone in a garden of small stones, each one marking a life lost in the wars. He had stood there for hours, talking to his daughter, telling her about the stars. It is beautiful, Myra continued. Simple and quiet, very human. She would have liked you, said. She always wanted to meet aliens. She used to draw pictures of what she thought they would look like. She never got any of them right. Myra smiled. I would have liked to meet her. They reached the edge of the garden, where a balcony looked out over the capital city. Spires of crystal and light stretched toward the sky. Flying vehicles moved between them like fish in a silver sea. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, a reminder of how young humanity was compared to the civilizations around it. My mother is preparing her succession speech, Myra said. Her voice was carefully neutral but could hear the tension beneath it. She is going to announce my coronation. It will happen next month. Turned to look at her. Are you ready? No, yes, I do not know, she laughed, and it sounded almost nervous. I have spent 200 years preparing for this moment. I have studied history and law and diplomacy. I have watched my mother rule and learned from her mistakes, but now that it is here, I feel like a child again. That's normal. Anyone who feels ready to rule 100 worlds is probably too crazy to actually do it. Myra shook her head. What if I fail? What if I make things worse? What if I undo everything my mother built? Took her hands in his. They were cool against his skin, as they had always been, but he had learned to find comfort in that coolness. Do you remember what I told you the first time we really talked? When I was lying in that medical bay, and you asked me why I had saved Ambassador Sora. You said that humans protect each other, even when it hurts, even when it costs everything. And do you remember what you said after the night of silver flames, when your mother asked you what kind of ruler you wanted to be? Myra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I said I wanted to rule the human way. Right, so what does that mean to you now after 5 years? The princess looked out at the city below. The three suns had almost finished setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple and deep blue. The first stars were appearing, tiny points of light that held worlds and peoples beyond counting. It means never giving up, she said slowly. Even when things seem impossible, it means fighting for the people I love, not just the people I rule. It means seeing individuals, not statistics. It means admitting when I am wrong and trying to do better. She turned back to face him, and there were tears in her starlight eyes. It means being kind, being brave, being human. Smiled, then I think you're ready. Will you stay with me when I am Empress? I'll stay with you as long as you want me to. That's what I do. That's what humans do. Myra pulled him into an embrace. It was awkward, as it always was between species built so differently. But they had learned to make it work, just as they had learned to make everything else work. Below them, the city glittered with light. Above them, the stars burned with ancient fire. And somewhere between, in a garden on a world that humans had only dreamed of a generation ago, two people held each other and looked toward the future. In the years that followed, historians would debate exactly when the galaxy changed. Some pointed to the night of silver flames, when a single human defeated a conspiracy that threatened to tear the Dominion apart. Others pointed to the declaration that made humanity a protected species, equal partners in an empire that had stood for 3,000 years. But those who knew the truth said it happened earlier. It happened in a moment that no one recorded, when a wounded security officer threw himself in front of a blade to save a stranger. It happened when a young princess looked at that act and saw something that changed her forever. It happened when royal blood was about to spill, and a human stepped forward. Empress Myra ruled for 600 years. In that time, she transformed the Dominion into something new, something that had never existed before. A true partnership of species, working together instead of one ruling over the rest. She faced rebellions and wars and crises that would have broken lesser rulers. She never gave up. Park stayed by her side for 40 more years, until age finally claimed him. They buried him in the garden where they used to walk, beside a fountain that sang with water falling upward. His grave marker was simple and quiet, very human. But his legacy lived on, in the way the Empress ruled, in the courage of the humans who spread across the stars, in the stories that parents told their children about the night when everything changed. The story always ended the same way. Once upon a time, royal blood was about to spill, and a human stepped forward, and nothing was ever the same again.